Season 1 of House of the Dragon just wrapped up on Sunday, and I haven't seen a single episode, so I'm watching the finale to see if I can figure out what's going on.
I've heard of House of Cards, but House of the Dragon? Welcome back to another installment of Steve ruins a TV show for himself by watching it out of order. This time we're doing House of the Dragon, which is a prequel to Game of Thrones, which, as you may remember, is a show I watched out of order a few years ago. Now, I don't remember anything from Game of Thrones, like at all. I know there's a blonde family and they were the dragon people, so I'm assuming that family is in this show because dragon is in the title. Then of course, I would guess the main family from Game of Thrones, the Starks, the Wolf family, are gonna be in this show too. And then the third big family, the Lannisters, are probably gonna show up as well. They're also blonde, which might be confusing, but the dragon family has long hair and the Lannister family has short hair. Short-haired queen, remember her? And that's basically all I remember. It's been a while. I was watching it out of order. I didn't really understand what was going on. So, without further ado, here we go. The episode starts with a cool shot of a map table. A little boy caresses the city of Driftmark ever so gently, perhaps fondly remembering a city that is now destroyed. Maybe that's where he grew up and he has loved ones there. Or maybe he just likes how the table feels on his little fingers. A blonde woman walks in the room and this little boy is upset because a sea snake is going to die and he's going to have to be Lord of the Tides, which honestly sounds pretty sick. I'm not sure why he's so bummed about it. Okay. So apparently the Lord of the Tides is the ruler of Driftmark, so that's why he was sticking his fingers in its crevices earlier. All right, I'm having trouble nailing down the relationship between these two, but during this conversation, I learned that this blonde lady is the heir to something. Blonde hair on a blonde heir. The blonde heir gives the little boy 3 smoochies on his head and tells him that everything's gonna be okay. So maybe this is like her nephew or something. Then this bald fella comes down and calls the blonde heir princess. So I guess I can presume that blonde heir is the heir to the 7 kingdoms, which I can also infer means that the blonde dragon family from Game of Thrones is currently in power in this show, which checks out. An older woman with tremendously tall hair walks in and doesn't even say hello. She's just like, your dad is dead. It sucks, but like, what are we gonna do about it, you know? Also, Matt Smith is here and he looks ridiculous. If the blonde heir is the heir to the throne, then if her dad died, this means she's about to be the queen. But no, tall hair woman then says that someone named Aegon was crowned the new king. This makes the baby inside the blonde heir kick the crap out of her stomach because he's so mad. While all these blondes are chatting about their dead loved one, we find out that Matt Smith was the king's brother, and he seems to be insinuating that the dead king's wife killed his brother so that this Aegon character could become the king. It's a very stressful situation, and the blonde heir keeps wincing in pain because this baby is trying to get out of her stomach and get in on all the hot gossip. Then she starts bleeding and calmly declares that her baby is coming. Now we're here at this beautiful place experiencing the joys of childbirth with the blonde heir. These nurses are here with a crazy hat thing on their head, like a mixture between Hey Arnold and Padme from Star Wars. Meanwhile, Matt Smith is telling his men that they must protect the island because a group of people called the Greens are coming for them. Little known fact about the Greens, I actually looked this up. Spoiler alert. They're descendants of the Yellows and the Blues. I have no idea who the Greens are. Also, Matt Smith's character is named Damon. Matt Damon. Think about that. Now we're outside and the little boy is getting the crap beaten out of him by who I'm assuming is his brother. Then tall hair lady tells them that they need to come inside because their mom wants to have a word with them. Ooh. And oh, okay, it turns out that their mom is the blonde heir. I guess maybe that was obvious in the previous scene. I was just so thrown off because they look nothing alike. I mean, she has blonde hair and he and his brother don't have blonde hair. What does the dad look like in this situation? It seems like the blonde gene is pretty dominant in this family, so how the heck did these kids end up looking like this? The blonde heir tells this sharp-jawed little fella that as her oldest son, he is now the heir to whatever claim she has, which apparently isn't much of anything anymore. Also, sorry, I can't get off this. These boys look nothing like her. They're like 15 years old and she looks like she's 25. Maybe she's 30 and she just has a really good skincare routine. I guess having babies when you're like 13 in this universe isn't that weird, so never mind. But why is their hair so dark? All right, so Matt Smith is taking charge and trying to coordinate all these people, but then Sharpjaw comes down and tells him that the blonde heir is in charge. And she says that everybody just needs to chill out for a minute. But Matt Smith is like, well, I'm actually blonde, so everyone listen to me over this weird little brown-haired child. I'm also getting the vibe that Matt Smith doesn't really like these brown-haired children, which makes me think he's probably had some romantic trysts with the blonde heir. If there's anything I learned from watching Game of Thrones, it's that family members going to town on each other is like totally normal. Now Matt Smith is outside with these two guard guys. He asks them some questions trying to figure out if they're gonna be loyal to him or not, and then a big old dragon comes over and screams at them. Matt Smith tells them that they can either pledge fealty to the blonde heir or they can get killed by this dragon, which if I'm them is a pretty simple choice. The blonde heir seems very nice, and getting killed by a dragon sounds awful. The blonde heir is just like standing up and screaming for this baby to get out of her, but she won't let the crazy hat nurses help her. Then she reaches into her robe and starts pulling the baby out herself. I'm not gonna show too much of this because it's gruesome, but the baby isn't alive when it comes out. They have a little funeral and it's a big, big bummer. Then another one of these guard guys comes and interrupts the funeral to let everyone know that he is on the blonde heir's side. Those other guard guys probably told him what Matt Smith said and he was like, well, it's a no-brainer for me. Then everybody at the funeral kneels for her, which probably makes her feel a little bit better about the horrible day she's been having. All right, so now the blonde heir thinks that she's the queen and this Aegon guy thinks that he's the king, which begs the question, what happened in the first 9 episodes of the show? This seems like the inciting incident that's setting everything in motion, right? Like in Game of Thrones, episode 1, the king dies, and then everyone's like, oh, who's the king? And that's kind of what's going on now, but this is episode 10. But also, who am I to criticize? I literally haven't watched any of the show. I'm sure it's great. Now the map table is glowing and everyone's gathered around it. They're all trying to figure out how to defend the island against the inevitable onslaught of the Greens when this fancy bearded gentleman has a great idea. Use your dragons to burn them. Apparently the Greens also have dragons, but the blonde heir and her friends have more. And also there's wild dragons, just like hanging out in different spots around the world. Matt Smith says that they should bring all their dragons to King's Landing and just torch it up like their great-great-great-great-great-granddaughter ends up doing in Game of Thrones. But before they can settle on a game plan, Matt Smith leaves because a ship was spotted coming to shore. Hey, it's this actor. He's been in a bunch of stuff. He's Luna's dad in Harry Potter. He's the kicker in The Replacements, and he's the bad guy in Spider-Man, the lizard guy. Man, this guy rules. And now he's here to deliver some news. He asks to talk to the blonde heir, and she makes a super dramatic entrance on her dragon, like, all right, big shot, it wasn't that far of a walk. Okay, so the lizard guy works for Aegon, and he's here to lay down some terms. And just as I suspected, he talks about how Matt Smith and the blonde heir have kids together even though they're related, and everyone's just fine with that, I guess. Lizard guy's like, all your sons can own a bunch of land and you can live on this island in peace if you swear fealty to Aegon as king. And the blonde heir rips his Hand of the King badge off of his fur coat and throws it off the bridge. Lizard guy tells his maester to bring the blonde heir a piece of paper and she looks at it and cries. I guess this is something sentimental between the queen that made Aegon the king and the blonde heir. Like this is probably from a book that the queen used to read the blonde heir when she was little. I say confidently with no idea what's going on. Matt Smith gets upset and he and his men all draw their weapons and the dragon starts screaming, excited that maybe he'll get to eat some people. But the blonde heir tells them all to stop. She tells Lizard Guy that King's Landing will have her answer tomorrow. Now they're back at the cool map table trying to figure out what the heck to do. On one hand, the blonde heir should be the queen, and she has the right to fight for the crown, but on the other hand, if she brings her dragons to King's Landing, she'll be killing all the people that she's sworn to protect. Boy, this really is a Game of Thrones. Matt Smith obviously wants her to fight back and he yells at her, so the blonde heir tells everyone to leave so she can talk to her uncle who is also her lover and the father of some of her children. They get into a little debate and he grabs her by the neck. All of the men in this dragon family are just absolutely insane. Now we're in a room with tall hair woman and this guy with the most insane looking wig I've ever seen. Like we can all admit that this wig is awful, right? It's like they took a wig from a cheap Halloween costume for a surfer dude and put it on this guy and they were like, yeah, this should do the trick. Like, I can't even pay attention to what's going on in the scene because I'm so distracted by this wig. Okay, so it seems like these two are married and their children got taken from them. Also, Surfer Dude is sick, so he must be the sea snake. I guess it makes sense that the hair and makeup department were like, what should a guy that lives on a boat look like? Ah, yes, this is perfect. I mean, come on. I know I'm really harping on this, but look at his beard. You can't just have a normal beard and have crazy hair. If you're gonna stick this insane wig on his head, at least go all in and make his beard out of yarn or something. Surfer Dude finds out that Matt Smith killed his brother, I think. Again, it's hard to really pay attention with all the crazy hair in this room. Also, I'm trying to figure out the family tree here, right? I know that the blonde heir is Matt Smith's niece, and Matt Smith's brother used to be the king. So presumably Aegon is also Matt Smith's brother, or at the very least a part of the family in some capacity. And also Matt Smith and the blonde heir have children that I don't think we've met yet, and the blonde heir has 2 brown-haired children with someone not in the family. Maybe a Stark or a Baratheon? Those families have dark hair. That was like a whole thing in Game of Thrones. I'm also assuming that Tall Woman is related to the blonde heir, mostly because they both have blonde hair. So maybe she's the blonde heir's aunt, but that would make her Matt Smith's sister, and they don't really give off sibling vibes at all. So maybe she's like a cousin. And that is the family tree I've come up with. Surfer Dude comes into the room with who I can only assume are his daughters. You may be wondering why I would assume these are his daughters, and I would point to their terrible wigs. Surfer Dude says that he and his fleet are on the blonde heir's side. He also says that he took control of the Narrow Sea. They all come up with a plan to send Sharpjaw and Little Boy on dragons to tell their allies that they need to join the cause. Both of the mysteriously brown-haired children swear that they won't light anyone on fire during their travels, and then they head out. Now we're in a dark dungeon with Matt Smith. Oh my lord, there's a dragon in here. It's almost as if we're in this dragon's house. This really is the house of the dragon. The little boy arrives at his destination and looks over and sees another dragon. Is that what that is? There are so many dragons everywhere. How is anyone alive? When the little boy walks into this castle, he immediately sees a blonde guy with an eye patch. Perhaps this is the guy who that other dragon belongs to. But what's he doing here? He's just staring at the little boy, smirking. The guy sitting on this rock chair does not react well to the message the little boy brings. And apparently, Aegon already promised a marriage pact to him, so that's why the smirking blonde one-eyed fella is here to marry into the family. Meanwhile, Mr. Rockchair asks the little boy if he will also marry one of his daughters, and the little boy says that he's already betrothed. To whom? You're 14, you should not be betrothed already. 14 is the age where you're supposed to hold hands with someone and be nervous that your hand is sweaty, which in turn makes your hand sweaty, which makes you more nervous, which makes your hand even sweatier. This poor little guy shouldn't be betrothed. All right, so now Smirky is telling the little boy that he disapproves of him trying to steal his brother's throne, so this is presumably little boy's uncle, I think. I'm still not sure where Aegon falls on the family tree. Smirky pulls his eye patch off, revealing a crazy blue eye, and tells little boy that he needs to lose an eye as payment for his lost eye. Literally an eye for an eye. Little boy is like, I don't really like that deal. But then Smirky gets upset and tries to attack him, but Mr. Rockchair is like, everybody chill out. You're in my house, I don't want you to stain my floors with eye blood. So little boy is able to leave. But as he flies away on his dragon, Smirky shows up on his enormous dragon and starts chasing him. This dragon is just so big. I don't understand it. Are dragons like goldfish where they just never stop growing? Also, is that true about goldfish? As Smirky and his big dragon try to locate little boy's dragon goes rogue and shoots fire at Smirky's dragon. What a dumb dragon. Smirky tries to control his dragon, but this big, huge monster obviously is not gonna let that slide. Little boy flies above the clouds, and then despite Smirky's best efforts, his 1,000-foot dragon eats little boy and his dragon in one bite. Smirky looks down at the carnage and is like, oh, whoops. I definitely just started a war. Back at the map table room, Matt Smith breaks the news to the blonde heir, who turns around and looks straight at the camera. And then the episode ends. Wow. What a way to end a season of a TV show. This show feels like Game of Thrones, but like very pared down. Like there's way fewer characters, way fewer storylines. There's not as many big expensive scenes. Like where are the Lannisters and the Starks and all the other families? We're just basically seeing the Dragon family in the show, which, I mean, the show is called House of the Dragon, so what do I expect? But you know what I mean? It just feels like a very small version of Game of Thrones. I don't know if that's true for the whole season or if that was just this episode, but this felt way easier to follow for me as someone who only watched the last episode. It kind of seems like HBO said, okay, you blew it on the finale of the last show of Game of Thrones. So here's a quarter of the budget. Just do something similar, but with less money. But that was a really good finale, and it leads really well into a season 2. Next season, there's gonna be a big war. Matt Smith is gonna tame that huge dragon. the blonde heir is gonna burn down King's Landing because they killed her son. And then there's gonna obviously be a bunch of incest. All in all, a very good show. If you were a big Game of Thrones fan, having this show come on like 3 years later and kind of explain some of the backstory of Game of Thrones is super fun. Like even I was able to recognize some of the places and the names. So if you were like a big Game of Thrones fan, if you've read the books, you're probably watching this show like, ugh. Mwah. I hope you all enjoyed this video. I'm sorry I don't upload as much as I used to, but if you want to hear more of my obnoxious voice, I'm hosting a podcast. It's called Tough Drafts, and it's a podcast where me and a few of my friends play these stupid characters like we're screenwriting gurus and we write really dumb, silly TV and movie scripts and read them on the show. Season 2 just launched on Wednesday, so I'll leave a link below. You can listen to all of Season 1. You can listen to Season 2 episodes starting this week for the next 13 weeks. It's a ton of fun. Okay, bye.
Cody, did you say Shrek is American?
Yeah. I mean, what else would he be? He lives in a swamp. He lives in the American South.
What?
I think
Well,
we
that's where
have
swamps
to
are.
assume that Shrek is an American.
He lives in like a bayou?
Steve, could I just say, if you take away Shrek from America, what do we have left?
I don't think Shrek belongs in any country of the actual world. I think he's in a fictional world.
He lives in Louisiana.
Definitely Louisiana.
It's just Louisiana from like 1,000 years ago. That's
Yes.
the thing. It's not
Yes.
something we would recognize.
Okay,
Yeah.
so Shrek takes place in like 1000 AD, is what you're saying.
Shrek is a Native American.